Hi ACE students, my name is Kara Brown and I'm a certified interior designer at Bergmann. I work in the Rochester, New York office, which is the corporate headquarters. Bergmann also has offices throughout the United States, including the Northeast, Midwest, and Atlantic regions. Bergmann is an architecture, engineering, and planning firm that does commercial work. As an interior designer, I have worked on many different projects, including multi-use, multifamily, workplace, municipal or government, and healthcare. I'm also the Professional Development Chair for the IIDA Rochester City Center. The IIDA is the International Interior Design Association, which is similar to the AIA for architecture. It's just for interior designers. Today we will be talking about interior design, what it is, and the elements and principles of design that can be used throughout interior design and other design professions. What is interior design? The NCIDQ's definition of interior design is qualified by means of education, experience, and examination. Interior designers have a moral and ethical responsibility to protect consumers and occupants through the design of code-compliant, accessible, and inclusive interior environments that address well-being, while considering the complex physical, mental, and emotional needs of people. Basically, what this is saying is that interior designers need an education and need to take an examination to become a professional. During this time, they will learn skills to be able to create functional and code-compliant interiors that meet all of the needs of their clients, even the ones that they may not know. Interior designers design and manage the interior environment with knowledge and skills in the following: space planning, interior building materials and finishes, casework and millwork, furnishings and equipment, lighting, acoustics, wayfinding, and ergonomics and anthropometrics. Ergonomics and anthropometrics are the studies of the proportions of the human body and the relation of those to furniture and the space that people will use. Designers use all of these things to create a functional and well-designed space. Interior designers work basically with all of the space that is within the shell of a building. So they can work with the whole interior or just small parts of the interior. Space planning. Space planning is an in-depth analysis of how physical space is used in structures. Interior designers go through a process called programming to talk to their clients about what types of spaces they need and how they need to function. During the programming process, interior designers go through and evaluate and analyze what is needed for the space. Once they've gathered all of their information, they put this information together and create what is called a space plan. They come up with different options on where everything should be located to be able to develop a good floor plan. Space planning includes the concept of thinking about where things need to be located and what things need to be next to each other. For example, a kitchen should probably be next to the cafeteria area. So interior designers will go through and figure out what spaces need to be located near each other and which ones don't need to be located near each other, and then create an efficient floor plan based on that. Interior building materials and finishes. This is the part of interior design that a lot of people already know about. It's the thing that is visual and people can see. Interior designers need to select everything from the floor to the ceiling to the walls and everything inside those things. Materials and finishes are selected for aesthetic purposes, but they're also selected for function, durability, and safety. All finishes need to be durable and last. They need to function well, and they need to be safe for the public to use. Other things involved in materials and finishes are custom millwork and casework. Millwork is things that are built in, including wall paneling, display counters, custom cabinets, and built-in seating. Other millwork could include things like cabinets in a kitchen or things of that nature. Selecting and specifying furniture and equipment is another part of the interior designer's job. Furniture is selected not only for the aesthetics and the function, but it also has to be durable. It may have to be movable, or it may have to be static and stay still. It depends on what the use of the space is. But furniture is selected by the interior designer and then specified, and most interior designers work with a furniture dealer to go through the processing of the furniture, the purchase, and the installation. Lighting and acoustics. Lighting sets the mood and the ambience in a space, and it highlights a lot of the other elements and principles of design within the space, which we will talk about in a little bit. Acoustics deals with the sound in the built environment. Interior designers need to understand acoustics to help manipulate the sound. Sound can be very important in spaces like a workplace where there are a lot of people trying to get work done. And if the space doesn't have the right acoustics, people won't be able to hear each other talk in a meeting, or hear somebody that they might be on the phone with, or even just helps with the concentration. If acoustics are not correctly dealt with, it may cause a lot of problems within a space. Interior designers work with a lot of different types of people. Some of those people include people that may be within their firm, outside consultants, outside sales reps, and things like that. So some of the people that interior designers work alongside include architects, engineers, landscape architects, general contractors, and then specific contractors like flooring installers, electricians, carpenters, plumbers, painters. We also work with dealers and sales reps, including material sales reps, furniture dealers, light fixture dealers, audio-visual contractors, kitchen equipment contractors, graphic designers, and other people that would deal with the finishes or equipment that we select for our jobs. The elements and principles of design. The elements of design are similar to the ingredients for a recipe, and the principles of design are similar to the recipe. The elements of design can be thought of as the things that make up a design. Good or bad, all design will contain most of, if not all, of the elements. These elements include line, shape and form, light value, space, color, and texture. Line. Most people know what a line is. It usually is something that has a defined start and end, and it's the connection in between. Lines define shapes and act as a visual guide of an interior space. Lines can be horizontal, vertical, angular, or curved. In this image here, the lines are very dynamic because they are angular and create a sense of movement. Shape and form. Shape is a 2D object that is a contour of an enclosed space. Lines create shapes. Form is a 3D shape that has volume. So a shape would be something like a square, a circle, a rectangle, and a form would be like a cylinder or a box, something that has actual volume to it. In an interior space, a shape would be like the square that a window makes, but a form would be something more like furniture, like the shape of this sofa that has volume. Color. Color can stand alone, or it can be a background element that helps connect the other elements within a space. Color can be very bright, or it can be subdued. It can create an impactful space or emphasize the impact of something within a space. The use of individual color is easy, but combining them together can be somewhat difficult. There is a lot of psychology to color, and color can create many different moods or feels within a space. Value and light. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. So colors can have their own values, which can create different feelings within a space. Light can be made by the natural light, which would be in the sky, from the sun, or possibly the moon. And man-made light would be any kind of light fixture that is used. Light can create a type of ambience. For example, the lighting in a restaurant or a bar can create a deep mood if it's really dark, or you can light a space very bright, especially if it needs to be used for a function such as a healthcare space where the doctors and nurses need to see everything specific and things like that. Space can be positive or negative. In this example here, the positive space would be the furniture or this wood wall that takes up a volume. The negative space would be all of the air and the open area in the two-story area here in the image. Texture. Texture is something that we can feel. It can be hard, soft, smooth, rough, things like that. The texture in this image here is rough on the wall with the concrete tiling. But then if you look at the furniture, it looks like it might be smooth or possibly soft. You can have a lot of different textures within a space, which can create a lot of variety. The principles of design. As I mentioned before, the principles of design are like the recipe, and the elements are your ingredients that you use to put together to create the principles. How we apply the principles of design determines how successful the design is. Some of the principles of design can be standalone, and a lot of times they tend to be used together to create a cohesive design. The principles of design include balance, contrast, rhythm or movement, repetition, emphasis, unity, and scale and proportion. Balance. Balance is the first principle that we're going to talk about. Balance is the visual weight of a space. Symmetrical balance is what is shown in this image in the slide. If you were to cut a line down the middle of the slide, you could compare both sides and they would be equal. Both sides of the ceiling are similar. There are corridors on both sides in the same place. There are seating groupings in the same place, and even the stairway is symmetrical. Symmetrical balance tends to be the most pleasing balance to the eye. Many people like to use symmetrical balance because it feels comfortable and it's pleasing. Asymmetrical balance is when you have visual weight that is not the same on both sides, but it still creates a feeling of balance. An asymmetrical balance space may be something where you have a larger object on one side and a bunch of smaller objects on the other side. They aren't the same, but they still feel like they're balanced because the visual weight is generally the same. Radial balance is a type of symmetry that revolves around an axis. Radial balance would be something like a kaleidoscope. If you look at a kaleidoscope, the center is the point and it's symmetrical all the way around. Another idea of radial balance would be a dining table that's round with chairs all the way around it. The center point would be the middle of the dining table, and the chairs would all be spaced equally around that central point. Designers use balance to create stability and equilibrium within a space. Contrast. Contrast is the variation of elements in a design. It can be achieved using size, color, texture, or shape. In this example on this slide, you can see contrast using all of these elements. There's a contrast in size of the large bookcase versus the smaller lounge pieces. There's a contrast in color with the bright yellow-green lounge pieces versus the deeper purple lounge pieces. There's a contrast in texture because there are some furnishings that are smooth and glass, There are some chairs that have vinyl, which is a smooth texture, and there are some chairs with a plush texture. There are also contrasting shapes involved in this. The large bookcase is a circle versus the very rectangular square lounge pieces that are next to it. Rhythm or movement. Rhythm is a way that moves your eye throughout a space or throughout a picture. Rhythm can be created by the repetition of elements. In this example, rhythm is created with the repetition of many different things, including the light fixtures, the furnishings on both sides of this long cabinet, and the wall panels along the wall. The rhythm in this space draws your eye from the front of the space all the way to the back of the room because everything is going in that direction. Repetition. Repetition involves multiples of the same element. As we just said, repetition can create rhythm. Repetition can also be used by repeating a color throughout a space, a piece of furniture throughout a space, a shape, a line, or anything of that nature. So in this example, there are different types of lines used on both the wall and the ceiling that look similar. They're repeated. There's also certain types of furniture that are repeated, like the rectangular tables that are repeated all the way down the wall, and the types of lounge seating that are repeated along the other side of the image. Repeated elements can vary in size, color, or access and placement. Repeated elements can also create a pattern. So you can repeat the same element on different types of things, such as color. You can repeat the color green on a small piece of furniture, a large piece of furniture, on the wall, on the floor, something of that nature. Emphasis. Emphasis is drawing attention to a main point. The elements can work together to direct your eye to a certain focal point. All of the elements can be used to emphasize something. For example, if you make a lounge piece green and everything else in the space is a neutral color, that green lounge piece is going to stand out. You can also use things like size and proportion to create emphasis. For example, if you create a large sofa or a large element within a space and everything else is very tiny, that element is going to be emphasized and stand out. Scale and proportion. Proportion is the ratio between the size of one part to another. Scale is how the size of one object relates to another or to the space in which it is placed. Scale and proportion ensure that objects placed in space look like they belong to each other. Scale and proportion are important because the scale and proportion of things needs to make sense together. They also need to make sense with how the space is being used. The scale and proportion of furniture needs to function properly for the size and proportion of the human body. If people are going to be using furniture, it needs to make sense for them to be able to use, and it needs to work with how their body works. Scale and proportion is also important because it makes things feel correct or incorrect. Sometimes designers use scale and proportion to play with the idea of something being very small or very large. For example, you would proportion things for a child's room to be much smaller than you would for something that an adult would be using. But sometimes in some playful spaces, such as Disney World or something where there's more imaginative, creative ideas, scale and proportion can be used to create something that's very large or very small or feels different depending on the idea of what you're going for with the design. Unity and harmony. These make all of the elements and principles work together. The idea of unity and harmony is that you use the principles and elements of design to create a cohesive space. For example, using shapes or lines that repeat can create a sense of unity and harmony. Or using the correct form of balance, or even something like scale and proportion. If everything works together well, it has unity and harmony. If it's contrasting and doesn't work together well, then it may not have unity and harmony.